I'll go and hopefully we'll start.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Guess what we're talking about today?
I know.
Uh, so yes, today we're tackling gay marriage and the Christian perspective on gay marriage, and it's going to be interesting. As with always, we're going to start out with a little bit of history, and it goes back. It probably goes back further, but right now what I found, and it goes back as far as 1970. There were actually lawsuits brought about in the 1970s seeking legal recognition of same-sex relationships. Brought the question of civil marriage rights and benefits for same-sex couples to public attention. Though during that time, most of them proved very unsuccessful in succeeding at these lawsuits. In 1993, Bear versus Mike was a lawsuit in which three same-sex couples argued that Hawaii's prohibition of same-sex marriage violated the state constitution. And in that case, they did win. The Supreme Court of Hawaii decided that it was the Constitution did prohibit that.
Is Mike like a city or something like that?
I'm not sure. I didn't go
Probably a Hawaiian
complete.
name.
Yeah. When I looked at it, I was like, that's spelled wrong. But I went back and looked at it, it's spelled right. But the court did decide in favor of the gay couples because they decided that yes, the prohibiting that was against the Constitution of Hawaii. And in 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act was introduced. So I didn't get a lot of details on this, but basically this is here to give an idea that there was, in this case I have to mention the party, the Republican Party did fight a long time, and in some cases are still fighting. They try to block any and all potential gay marriage legal rights of any kind. And so they called the act the Defense of Marriage Act to defend in their mind, the sanctity of marriage between a man and a woman. In 2004, Massachusetts was the first state to legalize same-sex marriage, so they get the rights to the marriage license and everything else, the full board. And then, of course, there's still, at this time, the Republicans are still trying to fight it, and many other states have not come across yet, and some states have outright banned it. Until 2015, when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all state bans making gay marriage or same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. So that's where we stand right now. There are still, obviously it's a hugely controversial subject, but currently, as far as the legal system goes, the laws go, it is legal in all 50 states and recognized in all 50 states.
But that also includes all the other legal rights. When I say that, I mean
Insurance here.
yeah. Like
Yes.
insurance and like
Yeah.
ownership.
For the most part, the only areas where it's not fully recognized is within churches. So there are still churches that can deny the same-sex marriage ceremonies being done inside their church. And of course, we've seen lawsuits regarding that happen as well. And then, what was it, the third lesson, we talked about the Baker. So that also ties very much into this subject as well. Now, before I get into the next slide, I want to give you a quick overview of how my research went on this. So I started looking into, first off, it's probably no secret, I'm not really a huge fan of the gay marriage. I got some friends that are gay, and I got no problem with the people. It's just I don't support the act. So I already knew what I was going to go and find on. So I looked for the opposite first. Mm-hmm. Who supports it? Why do they support it? And what are the reasons for that? And I found that those that come from a Christian perspective that do support it, they use all the same arguments, slightly different words in different articles, but it's always the same arguments, the same Bible verses that they're going to. And then Aaron sent me a video. I was going to show it here. I thought I was like, that'd be great. I can show that. I don't have to say a thing. It was 2 hours long. So
You wouldn't have to go to church.
yeah. So we won't be doing that. Instead, I will be summarizing the talking points that these two gentlemen had. And there's one guy is for gay marriage, and he's also gay, a gay Christian, and the other gentleman is obviously a straight Christian. And it was I would call it a debate / discussion. There were elements to both that narrative. There was some things that I'm just going to completely leave out because it's not appropriate for this venue. So I'll be summarizing what I feel is appropriate for the Sunday school lesson here. And in areas where I'll be attempting to quote them, I should be paraphrasing, but there's some spots where I'm like, I want to make sure you understand that this is how they are saying this kind of thing. So, with that said, I'm going to start with Matthew Vines. And he is an LGBT activist known for the viral YouTube video, The Gay Debate, the Bible and Homosexuality, and his related 2014 book, God and the Gay Christian. So he's, this guy, watching the video, he's well versed in the Bible. He knows his Bible. I absolutely give him that. And he makes some very logical arguments. He starts out with giving an example of how we need to change our lens. So his first example is, if you were to just look at the Bible, and just go off what the Bible says, where's the center of the universe?
Well,
God. But as far as the physical, what we can see right now, what planet?
Here.
The Earth, yeah. Within the Bible, all the terminology and everything, the specific example that he gave is, I don't remember the name of the battle, but it was a battle where God steeled the sun and let so those people would win, and then he let the sun go on down. So the sun rises, the sun sets. That all indicates that the sun is moving, the Earth stands still. And of course, when the telescope was invented, we realized, oh no, we're moving. We're not the center of the universe. Earth isn't the center of the universe. The sun isn't even the center of the universe. It's somewhere else. So we've had to change our lens. Now, we still use the terminology, the sun rises, the sun sets, because that's a lot easier than say, well, the Earth rotates so much, and then the sun appears to come down. It's sun rises, sun sets. We understand, because our lens has changed, that it is the Earth moving, and the sun itself is not actually rising and setting. So he proposes that we need to change our lens when it comes to gay marriage as well. We need to look at it differently. Because in the Bible, the rising and setting was being written, those words were used so that people in that time could understand what was being described, what was being said. So he proposes that we may need to do the same thing for gay marriage. And he moves on to Romans 1:26. Now this is where I want to be very specific about how he describes this. And in Romans 1:26, he describes the passage as the people they're turning away from God. They're trying to become independent. They don't want to worship God anymore. And then he reads the one verse. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And he also points out Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, I didn't read any verse from Sodom and Gomorrah, so I won't either. But he describes Sodom and Gomorrah, the two angels come in, two male angels, he did emphasize that. And they're confronted by all the male men in Sodom and Gomorrah. And again, this is his words. They tell the angels that we're going to gang rape you. Of course, the angels blind the men, they escape, and they get away.
This is also Matthew Vines brings up.
Matthew Vines brings up, yes.
Been lost to watch.
And I'm doing it in reverse
Yeah.
of the video did. So now he points these out, and then he says, now he also admits that he found, I think he said, 4 references to homosexual relations in the Bible. And all 4 of them were negative viewpoints from the Bible. The Bible views them as negative. But he said, I need to change he wants to change his lens, and he looks at why are they being looked at negative. And he proposes that both in Romans 1:26 and then there in Sodom and Gomorrah, we see, and the way he describes it is there's no love and there's no marriage between those the homosexual relations that's going on there. They're driven by lust instead of love. and it is fornication. So he proposes that because that those things are there, that's why it's wrong, not because it's male and male and female and female. It's wrong because it's out of wedlock. It's driven by lust instead of love. And then he goes on to make, this is a point that I'm a little conflicted, but it's a good point. If the Christian community, if we were to decide, yes, gay marriage is wrong, and if you're a Christian and you're gay, then you cannot get married. You cannot find a spouse. You cannot find any of that. You're going to have to be celibate. And he believes this, that if we were to do that, then we're going to force a particular class of people to be celibate. We're going to force them. And he points out how the Roman Catholic Church has said, no, celibacy is a gift. If you choose to be a bishop or priest within the Roman Catholic Church, you're choosing to be celibate.
That didn't work very well.
Yeah. And so he sees it as a gift. Now he points out, this is another one where he goes to the Bible, 1 Corinthians 7:7, and where Paul is, Paul, right? I looked up this morning and I'm terrible with names. Always. And Paul is addressing Corinthians about some questions they have for him. Now again, he summarizes this chapter by saying, the Corinthians are writing to Paul, we want to have sex. We want to do these things. We can't, what's your opinion? And Paul writes back, and he quotes this one verse, which that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Now this is his basis for saying that celibacy is a gift. It is something that we cannot force upon someone else. It was a gift for Paul that he could be celibate and not have any issues with it. And so Paul's wishing that they all have that same gift, but since they don't, then he summarizes the rest of the chapter as, go get married, and then it's fine. And he uses that as, this is another point that, and yes, I agree that if we're going down that path, that does seem very much like we're forcing a particular class of people within the Christian community to be something that would seem to be a gift, and not something that's supposed to be forced upon. Now, the other gentleman who was speaking was Sean McDowell, and this is another part where all the ones, when I did get to my part of the research where I was researching was Bible State against gay marriage, they all used many of the same arguments again. Now, Sean McDowell is a doctor. He's a Bible department at Capistrano Valley Christian Schools in California. And he was the awarded teacher is also a popular national youth speaker.
Big in apologetics. So.
Okay. Now he starts out, I won't be paraphrasing as much from him as I did from Matthew, because Sean started out, this is where I side with Matthew over Sean in the way they did this debate. Sean started out attacking, very much was on the attack path. He didn't say, this is what I believe and why. Matthew came out and said, this is what I believe and why. I respect that quite a bit, especially in the political debate system. That's the way it should be done. This is what I believe and why. So now Sean McDowell, he did have several points. The one point that he had that I want to put in, and then the rest will be from a general research. Genesis 1:28, where Adam is actually commanded to multiply. There's a couple things here. First off, he's been given the command to multiply. How is he going to do that if what he has is another man? And let me go to that because I need to read you that section. So, no, that's not 1:28. It's not open. I apologize. So I'll paraphrase because it'll take me a while to find it and open it up. Basically, it's the passage where Jesus is deciding that Adam is named everybody for each animal there's been made, and then Jesus is like, it's not good for man to be alone. We'll find him the phrase in the King James is a helpmate or a helpmeet. And the Hebrew word for that is ezer, I think. And the strict definition of that Hebrew word is his opposite. So it's not just, okay, he needs a helpmeet to handle all this, so just give him whatever. No, it's his opposite that he's saying that he needs. And then Genesis 2:18 through 24, and then in Matthew 19:1 through 8. Now the reason I'm referencing both of these, and they both, actually in Matthew is referring back to Genesis. There's an article I found that had a fairly decent point. Somebody asked the question, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? And then there's the article references something that a question that's legitimately asked quite often, and it seems to happen quite often. It says, you Christians pick and choose which verses of the Bible you want to obey. The book of Leviticus also prohibits what you can eat and prescribes animal sacrifices. Why do you disregard those rules but adhere to these rules? Now, the particular one in Leviticus that we're looking at right now, that this article is looking at, is if there is a man who lies with a male as those who lie with women, both of them have committed a detestable act, Leviticus 2:13. So this article is proposing that, yes, we're going to stick with that. And then the question that many people have, they're not Christians, is like, well, why? You disregard the food restrictions and everything else, but just stick with this. And the reason for that, the reason we do that is because in the New Testament we're getting the new law, and sometimes that new law overlaps. So Genesis 2:18 through 24. And the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. Oh, here it is. I was in the wrong chapter. I will make him a helpmeet for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called the living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God taken from the man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And then in Matthew 19:1 through 9, and it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came into the coast of Judea beyond Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that which made them? At the beginning made them male and female. This is where he's referring back to Genesis 2. And said, for this cause shall man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. They said unto him, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement, and put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. So we see here. Okay.
Sorry, the Genesis 1:28. That's when God created humanity and said, "Be fruitful and multiply."
Yes. I got ahead of myself a little bit. So yes, Genesis 2:18 has both the definition of the Hebrew word is his opposite, and it also has where Adam is like, I have a woman, I have a wife, and then men, when they grow up, they should leave their mother and father and cleave unto their wife and become one flesh. And then Jesus repeats those same words in Matthew, and that's where we go from, okay, this is old law, and it is also new law because it is repeated. Jesus reinforces that for us. The next portion, Leviticus. Now, we already read Leviticus there, 2013. And in Romans, now Romans 1:26. Does anybody know what I've repeated many times throughout these lessons about context? Context matters. So Romans 1:26 is being used as it doesn't have love, it's out of wedlock. If it was love, it wasn't wedlock, it's okay. Now, we don't have anything that says if it's wedlock and it's driven by love, it's okay. The Bible doesn't come out directly and say that about gay marriage. But if we go back and look at Romans 1 and get more context for that particular verse. Now, this one's not as easy to see as Corinthians, but we'll see what we get here. Let's see, where should I start? We'll just start at, here we go. Romans 1:22. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image that made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change their natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust toward one another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was met. Is that, when you hear that, does that sound a little bit different than how Matthew described that chapter? It seems more like we're getting a description here of this is what they're doing wrong, and they're going to pay for this, instead of this is why it's wrong, and this is a supporting for this method of doing this is wrong. Now, I could be completely off. That's just my interpretation there. So that is, and of course Leviticus and Romans, in my opinion, Leviticus is where it's laid down first. It is about abomination. And then Romans reinforces that. A couple other things I want to address real quick from that, not generally addressed, but Matthew made some points about. Matthew Vines. The celibacy is a gift. Now this is one where I want to go back and get the whole context there again. So this is Paul responding to the Corinthians, and they have written him several questions about sexuality. And he kind of summarizes through 1 through 6 what their questions are, and then we're going to read on past 7 to get the full context here. So 1 Corinthians 7:1. Now for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent, and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer, then can come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. I say this as concession, not as a command. I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To married I give this command, not I, but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled with her husband, and the husband must not divorce his wife. Does that sound different than the original context that was given for that chapter? My interpretation of this, and take it or leave it, entirely up to you, the gift that he's talking about is his ability to resist these temptations. The verses 1 through 6, it very much seems like the Corinthians are writing to Paul and saying, hey, we want to have sex. We want to have all kinds of sex with everybody, and we can't resist the temptation. And then he's like, well, no, if you want to do that, it must be husband and wife. Now, I wish you was like me. I wish you could resist the temptation. I don't see anything in there that says, aside from the fact that Paul is not going to get married, and he just said man should have sex with the wife and wife with the husband. So if he's not going to get married, yes, he's going to celibate, but there's nothing in there where he's actually saying, I wish you were all just celibate. And that celibacy is a gift that you don't have to work at. Anybody that takes a vow of celibacy, they're still going to encounter some kind of temptation, probably. So let's look at something other than sex, and other than celibacy. Somebody has a problem with drugs, and they take a vow, I'm never going to take drugs again. Can they still be tempted by that? So it's not just him saying, I wish you were all like me and had the gift of celibacy, and then you're not going to have this problem whatsoever. They were writing to him about a legit problem. And so his gift, in my opinion, is not that of celibacy. It is that of being able to resist, or has a method that when he does encounter these temptations, he's able to recite something in his head, or he knows how to avert his eyes at the right time so that he does not follow through with that temptation and commit the act. And then the final, well, that was I've already taken care of Romans 1 earlier. All right. Even with outlines, I'm still out of order. I can't keep up. So now this is something I don't have on the slide because I didn't know any way to present it on the slide. But one thing that both Matthew and Sean both agreed on is how the Christian community has treated people that are gay. I often go back and try and treat it as it's a God hates the sin, but not the sinner. And a little bit more on the celibacy part is, in a way, I understand what he's saying is we would be forcing that class of Christians to be celibate. But at the same time, I also look at it as, if we have this other temptation, like the drugs or something else, and we're choosing to live the life of Christ, we're now choosing to resist those temptations. And if we know it is a sin to do the drugs, if we know it's a sin to commit the gay act, we're choosing, if we want to be a Christian, if we're following on the side that the Bible does say it's wrong, and we're choosing to be a Christian, then we're choosing celibacy. It's not being forced on us, not by other people. It's being forced on us by, here's God's law, and this is what you should do. You should not sin. And it doesn't just relate to the gay act, the act of doing a gay act. Now, if you have those temptations, if you resist the temptation, that's fine. You haven't done anything wrong. And that applies to every temptation, every sin. If you resist the temptation to commit the sin, then you're fine. There should not be a condemnation for that. I have a friend that was completely disowned by her parents, her mother. And as far as I know, she never actually acted on her desires. Not once. So in my opinion, she never committed the sin. But her parent, her mother, completely disowned her, kicked her out. And now I can't see my friend because she's now in another state and I don't get to see her that often. I find that in itself to be detestable. I find that if we're going to hate on a person just because they have these temptations, we are sinning because we're supposed to love and be encouraging to everything. If they come into the church and say, "Hey, I've got this sin," and at this point, it's not even about being gay or anything. It's just any sin. That's how we should approach it. Is if you got those temptations, we're going to help you. We're supposed to be here to help you and give you the tools and the knowledge you need to resist the temptations, whatever your particular temptations may be. But for most of the time, maybe not the actual numbers of the vast majority of Christians, but the outspoken ones and the ones that become seen as the vast majority has done some extremely detestable things to especially to the gay community. Now, what does this have to do with the politics? There's a lot going on with that. There are still legislation and policies trying to be introduced that will restrict the gay marriage. There are legislation and policies trying to be introduced that will still allow the churches to make a decision. We will go so far with working with the gay people, but not this far. And there are some conservative commentaries that will say that because, and they fall on the side that gay marriage is wrong according to the Bible, they consider the nuclear family to be a man, woman, husband, wife, and their children. And because we have allowed the government to destroy the nuclear family and change what the nuclear family is supposed to look like, God is no longer going to bless America. And I didn't look at the right verses for it, but there is in the Bible where God says if the country follows His laws, He will bless that country. So politically speaking, now that as a Christian, I'm like, yes, we need to try and get the political back on track and get America back to a position where God will be like, yes, this is a good country, let me bless them. The American citizen in me, the Marine in me, says, no, I fought for these rights. America was founded on religious freedom and the ability to choose what you want to do. So maybe we Christians need to focus on our own households, our own communities, and let our own communities and households be blessed. And just be that shining beacon. And then if the country follows, great. If it doesn't, that's okay, because we've made sure we are right with God. So that's the facts, current state. That's both sides as well as I can represent both sides. I know I don't do as well of a job representing as some people, much more eloquent spoken than I am. But comments, questions,
Well,
or
what about the heterosexuals who are so adamant against gay marriage, but it's okay for them to not get married? They just shack up together and have children.
Yeah,
I mean,
they seem to act like the gay marriage is a worse sin than fornication.
Yeah.
Which
at least these people are willing to make a commitment to one.
yeah, I would say, I mean, if I were to get in a debate with somebody who was in that situation, they was like, and they really just wanted to lay it all thick. I'm not one to judge very often, but I'll smack somebody down real quick if I see the hypocrisy. I'll lay it in there. And anybody that is doing that, I would absolutely tell them, you know what? These two, you may think that Christianity is against gay marriage, but these two people that are in their gay marriage, they're more Christian than you are right now, because you're doing these things.
Today, that it seems like people want a wedding, but they don't want a marriage.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how many people are involved.
No.
Also, the 1 Corinthians, he has some really strong words about divorce, and that's another side of that as well.
Yeah.
Why do you have a question mark about celibacy as a gift question?
Because
It's a
so
choice.
early on, Matthew Vines very much he makes it's a logical if you go with the information he provides, it's a logical conclusion that celibacy is a gift, that one that Paul had, and so I put the question mark here. Is it really? Is it really? If we go back and look at the full context of that and not just go off of Matthew Vine's summary of that passage, is it really a gift? Can we really look at it that way? So that's why I put the question mark on it. Just so that I know I don't really go off of that very well and explain the slides too much, but
Some discussions when the Catholics are saying the Pope is actually trying to wrestle with the issue of celibacy. I was trying to think, I guess it was after Vatican II. Yeah, it would have been, because this just been in the last 20 years. I wouldn't call him a close friend, but a friend of mine who was an outstanding Episcopal priest, wife and 2 children, decided he wanted to become Catholic in Mobile, and they brought him in and said, "You're already married, you already have 2 children. But he's a
Remain
young,
as you are.
brilliant guy and probably one of the best, just really strong ministers of the large Episcopal church. I just, they hated it when he left because he was just so dynamic and the congregation was doing so well. And he still is. My brother and sister are members of it now. But he now is, I think he's like the lead priest, one of the biggest Catholic churches in Mobile now.
Yeah.
And I knew his wife as well.
It's kind of like they're,
But that was in what, probably like early '80s, mid '80s, probably when that occurred.
it's almost as if they're like, what you did before you became a priest is
Right.
It's fine. It's just like, getting saved is like what you did before is not forgiven. It's not going forward. You're trying to do the right thing.
I may be wrong on this, but wasn't some of the reason for celibacy and married priests a property ownership in the past? So when lands and, a lot of times large families, you had certain sons became priests or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that kept the property rights less complicated.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I remember something very similar to that. I watched
And
a
this is
few.
years.
Yeah.
Middle Ages, yeah.
I watched I watched two variations. There were two TV shows about the Borgias. And let's see. One of the Borgias became a pope, and at the point in time he became the pope, he then was like, I'm going to recognize that I have two sons and a daughter. But a lot of discussion up to that point, they really did a lot of expose on why they're not allowed to get married, why they're not allowed to have kids and everything. It's been like 4 years since I watched it. I don't remember everything, and obviously TV shows not going to be entirely accurate. But it was definitely property rights and who should own it, because they're, as the bishops and everything, they're not really supposed to own the property.
I would also comment the question about how the lens changes. So yes, the Earth is not the center of the universe, but without those lenses changing somewhat, women would have no rights and would still be viewed as property as well.
Yes.
There's so many things like that along the way, and slavery and everything like that. Without time and the changing of the lens, would still be on gauges.
And that's kind of his discussion that I think he does something about the trajectory of Scripture. We see the trajectory of Scripture of, in the New Testament, women don't necessarily have rights in the culture, but if you look at how women are viewed from the Old Testament to the New Testament, there's this trajectory. And he argues that there's a similar sort of thing because we're talking about a type of marriage that the first century would just not have any concept of.
And I would also say, this at this point when it's adults making things, but maybe we also need to consider child rights and how big of an issue that is, where they have no choice in who they're being married off to. That might be as important as anything else.
And I'm glad you bring that up. There was something I was going to mention, I totally forgot to mention it. I did read a verse where it said, Paul said that the wife's body is not her own, it belongs to him, and his body is not his own, it belongs to her. We see, to the wife, we see that even there, within a good and right marriage, it is equal.
It is equal.
There is no, there are other parts where it says the man is the head of household in certain parts, but as far as the relationship between the man and husband, or the man and wife, husband and wife, it is supposed to be an equal relationship there. And it's in that particular context, an equal relationship in the sexual matters.
Which was bucking that culture.
Yes. And the reason I was bringing that up at one point in time is there was one of the articles I read was like, they treated women terribly back then. Why are we going to listen to everything like this? And I was like, well, no, this particular verse says, while the culture itself may do this to women, in the Christian community, we should not, in a roundabout way. That's what that's saying.
We basically need to get out of people's sex lives.
Sorry?
We basically need to get out of everybody's sex lives.
Yeah.
This country is just infatuated with everybody's sex life.
No, why do you have to tell me?
Yeah.
You know, I don't wanna know what you do in the bedroom. I won't tell you, you don't tell me.
I've always been, I'm a Marine. I've got friends that are not necessarily in the church all the time, and I've always been asked when I was dating younger and everything, I was like, well, did you get any and all that stuff? And I'm like, I'm a gentleman. I don't kiss and tell. Period. And I still don't. The only product you have of any kind of evidence is that I got a job. That's it.
I have gay friends that are married,
Mhm.
you know, and they're good people.
Yeah.
Just really good people.
Thank you so much for tackling.
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I think we're.
Oh, right. I got to block more. All right. So we'll go and close the prayer and then we'll head on. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank us all be able to gather here this morning to learn from your word. Thank you for letting us have a good discussion on the matter of gay marriage. We pray that you let us all to dwell on and make our own decisions on what we feel is right on that and which direction we should each go. Help us to learn from your word this morning in the morning service and help us get through the rest of this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I know
Yes, sir.